All right, Shalom. I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rakak Wadash. I want to say double honor to the apostles and the elders, a great millstone for teaching his word in truth and sincerity, and for ruling well. And salutations to my fellow Akim across the four corners of the globe, preachers and prophesying in the name of Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai. Hey, this is the brother Gabar Yahweh from GMS Hawaii, coming to you with another lesson. In today's lesson, I want to focus on the small hats, okay, and their reported or purported role as being the Lord's people. And whenever we go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, which we read about the blessings and the cursings, and normally we go in depth about the curses because that's what affects us today, right? The detractors like Vocab Malone, and there's a whole plethora of individuals that actually try to take Deuteronomy 28 and break it down in their own way so that it doesn't fit us. The first thing they'll come out their mouth is saying that, oh, this is what the black Hebrew Israelites believe. But it's not just about black people in America, and we're not black people. We're the Israelites, preferably the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, these so-called Negroes that were drugged here in cargo slave ships to serve out punishment for our iniquities, along with the so-called Native American Indians and the ones you ignorantly call Latino Hispanics here in America. And the Americas were put through a great onslaught for our iniquities. And that goes into the curses, because the scripture says that the curses was going to be a sign and for a sign and a wonder. This Deuteronomy 28:45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord Yahweh thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. Verse 46. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder upon thy seed forever. Now I was reading through a PDF. I got to go through it some more, but an individual wrote a PDF, and he called himself breaking down Deuteronomy 28 and claiming that the curses only apply to us in the promised land. But the scripture says right here that they was going to be for a sign and a wonder upon thy seed forever. And we as Israelites are definitely suffering these curses here in America. And one of the biggest curses that we suffer here in America is the lack of finance. We don't have power in finance. We don't control the finances of the world. We don't lend to people. People lend to us, preferably the nation of Edom. And even when you go into other captivities, we weren't money lenders and changers. Now, we were good at recording a lot of information. You know what I'm saying? But here in this captivity that we're currently in, we're last place in everything. And that goes back to the scriptures. Why? It said it was going to be a sign and a wonder. So the word for sign there in the Hebrew is a wat. All right? That word for sign and wonder in the Hebrew is awat, not ot. And it says a signal, a distinguishing mark, a banner, remembrance, or an omen, a warning, a token, an ensign, a standard, proof. So these curses would be proof who we are in the world. All right. And when you look at the small hats, the 1948ers, they're not going through this. They're not last in finance. In fact, they overwhelmingly lead finance, all right, in the world, especially here in America, but in the whole entire world, the earth. Okay, they're not last place in anything. They're the first in everything. Okay, and you can't tell me that that's because the small hats so-called piousness and following the laws of the Lord, because they're not doing any of that. Okay, so these curses would be proof, it's also a sign and a wonder. So that word for sign we know is proof. That word for wonder, the Hebrew word there is mapa ma 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 Mawapath, Mawapath, and it says a wonder, a sign, a miracle, all right, a token. So these signs, these curses that we're going to, and I'm going to try to focus on finance in this lesson right now, um, because a lot of these detractors, they like to run straight to Deuteronomy 28:68 and try to dismiss that right away. But let's talk about finance. Let's talk about how the so-called Negro in America is last in economics all through the world, and not just the so-called Negro, so-called Latinos and Native Americans too. It says black men in the U.S., black men in the U.S., so-called black men, we're not black, black men in the U.S. economy, how the economic recovery and is perpetuating systemic racism. It says, while the U.S. economy is recovering for many Americans, black men continue to experience persistent unemployment gaps and reduced economic opportunity. And not just so-called black men, but women, Latino men, women, all right, so-called Native American men, women, all right, we're the last place. But when you look at the small hats, Salakia, when you look at the small hats, where is it at? Salakia. Yep. When you look at the small hats, it says how American small hats lost by winning on the triumph and tragedy of the American small hat story. All right, and we're gonna go into this because these people who claim to be the Lord's people, they're first in everything, especially when it comes to economics and finance. You know, another one. This is a list of prominent small hat businesses founded by American small hats. You know, and we shop at these places our whole lives. We deal in business in America greatly. You don't see overwhelming presence of so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in business. Now, I'm not saying that. That's not to say that there are Negroes in America or any other Jakes in America that are not getting it like that. Because you've always had a wealthy class, a semi-middle class, and a poor class, man. All right, but mainly a poor and a wealthy class. All right, so it's no different. The so-called small hats got the same thing, but they still overwhelmingly win. All right, so all these different businesses will claim to be. These are just just a handful, but these are major businesses that's still operating and running right now. Uh, uh, what is this? Baskin and Robbins, Burt Baskins and Irv Robbins, so-called Jews. Ben and Jerry's, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, Dunkin' Donuts, William Rosenberg, Estee Lauderdale, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, Dustin Moskowitz, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Google, Haagen-Dazs, Ruben and Ross Mattis, Hasbro, Henry and Halal, Hasenfield, H&R Block. Hey, Jake goes straight to H&R Block to get them checks cashed come tax season, man. Henry Woolman Block. And we don't have business. Goldman Sachs, Warner Brothers, DreamWorks, Calvin Klein, Dell, and the list goes on. This is just a handful of businesses, man. You see? And so another reason why we constantly are in flux with these nations, particularly Amalek, is because they're not suffering like that. And anything that they're going through is self-imposed, man. Okay? They're putting hell on nations in the Middle East. That's the reason why it's instability there. It's not because these people just want to wipe you off the map and just get you up out of there. And even if they did that, you small hats are everywhere, man. They're all in South Central America, China, they all over the world, man. But while they all over the world, again, they lead in finance and economics, which we don't lead in at all. So for Vocab Malone, and I was speaking to one of the elders earlier about this, Vocab Malone doesn't look at anything objectively. To look at something objectively, what does that mean? Let's look at that objectively, right? It says in a way that is not influenced by personal feelings or opinions. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at this, the curses, and we're looking at them through the spirit and power of Yahweh by Shema Shai and truth. And we're not swayed by personal feelings or opinions, man. We're just telling you what's in the book, how it fits us. Now, do you see the small hats doing that? You don't. All right? And a lot of times, people like Vocab Malone will say things just to spur emotion and frustration, you know? That's why it doesn't even pay to try to even deal with that guy, because he's never going to get it. He don't want to understand it. They don't want us to be the real Israelites. But all the signs point at us. Again, Deuteronomy 28:46, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder upon thy seed forever. All right? Because thou served not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and gladness and heart for abundance of all things. Right? And this was part of that contract. Now these things were said to us in the before we went into the promised land. All right, which our people were going off doing what they did in the wilderness, but they got judged for it. And then the younger generation went into Israel along with Joshua and Caleb. Right, Joshua and Caleb being the only ones from that first generation that walked out of Egypt to go into the promised land. But these things happened to our people over time, and they didn't just happen in one stage. But one of the major stages, Deuteronomy 28:68, that was heavy, because that was literally one of the only, if not the only time that we were put on ships packed like rats, you know, and drug over to a land that wasn't ours, which happened to be spiritually Sodom and Egypt. So going back, it says, because thou servest not the Lord Yahweh by Shema Shai, that God, with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. Therefore, thou shalt serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. And that has not been done to the small hats. And as we jump up, we're going to jump up a couple of verses. It says right here, verse 43, the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail.
No, this isn't an anti-Semitic video, it's an educational one, and we hope you'll learn something by the end. Throughout history, Jewish people have been perceived as being wealthy, but where did that rhetoric stem from? We know that Jewish people, like all people, have their wealthy, middle class, and their lower income group. So Aluxers, today we're going to delve deep into this thought process. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. If you're not subscribed yet, you're missing out. Number 1. Judaism and wealth. Judaism doesn't cast poverty as a sign of righteousness, as other beliefs might. Instead, they believe each person should avoid poverty and be gainfully employed to earn their own living. This is a fundamental value that has led to a good work ethic and a personal responsibility for each person earning their own keep. Jewish people also believe in giving. They believe that 10 to 20% of wages should go toward religious and charitable causes. However, they don't believe in relying on charity to lift yourself up, and certainly not to become a burden on the community. Growing up with this kind of mindset makes for a solid foundation to see success as the only option. Number 2. European Jews couldn't own land. If you think anti-Semitism was only popularized in World War II, think again. Jewish people have had a tough history, including not being able to own land in Europe from as far back as the medieval times. But where there's a will, there's a way, so Jewish people found alternative ways to build their wealth outside of property owning. One of them being merchants and traders, industries to this day where they still have a big footprint in most countries. This created a safety net for Jewish communities, because where their services were needed, they were safe. Number 3. Religious opportunity was taken. To Christians in the Middle Ages, charging interest was a sin. This prevented them from holding any type of financial job, leaving the opportunities in that field open to the Jewish community who did not see lending in the same way. Jewish people became prominent in money lending businesses. The Jewish people's early success in this lucrative business was a forerunner for many of the stereotypes we hear today of.
Yeah, so here it is in the Middle Ages, which it was real Israelites, so-called black people that were moving and grooving, right? The reason why it wasn't that when they say Christians, those are believers in Yahushua, the Messiah. So those were Jews who believed in Yahushua. When it came to money lending, is about usury, and that's what these small hats use. They use usury. Okay, the scriptures tell us that we're not supposed to use usury upon one another. All right. So it wasn't that money lending was a sin. It was about how you used it. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 23 and 19. Deuteronomy 23 and 19. And this is always a touchy subject whenever you talk about the small hats. Anything you say can be construed as, anti-small hats, Deuteronomy 23 and 19. But we're just stating facts. So, Lord willing, this video will stay up. Deuteronomy 23 and 19. It says, Deuteronomy 23 and 19. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto the stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury. That's why in the Middle Ages, typically, we state, Jake wasn't always righteous, man, but typically you would try to stay away from using usury upon a person. If you lend somebody something, especially of your own nation, of our own nation, we have to get exactly what we lent to them. We can't get no more. And that's what usury is. That's called interest. All right. But the scripture said we can use it against the strangers. Well, while the small hatters, they use usury on everybody. And their usury is crippling. They use their usury on nations. They use their usury on individuals, on businesses, and everything. That's the reason why the American debt is so high, because of usury. All right. And that's wicked when you use it on us. We can use it on these other nations, but we're not supposed to use it on one another. But these Jews, they took the better parts of what they thought were the better parts of the scriptures, and they used them for their own personal gain, especially in finance, right? So when you look up what is usury, what is usury? Let's look up that term for usury. I'm gonna finish this off. In verse 20, it says, "Unto the stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that Yahweh the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine heart to, in the land whither thou goest to possess it." Okay, so we're not supposed to use usury on one another. It's permitted against the nations, but upon one another is not. But again, this is where they capitalized at. That's why they call them the money lenders, the money changer. So that word for usury, the Hebrew word there is nasat. It says to pay, to give interest, to lend for interest or usury, man. And that's what these people do. Now, when you look at the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, Seminole Indian, the real Israelites, we don't lend at all. We don't have banks. We have, if there are banks, there are few banks, and it's still caught in the system of Esau. So either way, Esau, he gets the win. And they make sure that black so-called, and I'm focusing on black banks because they don't have a lot of information on Hispanic bank, Latin banks, and Native American banks, but they do have few banks. All right. So this says why we need black-owned banks. All right. It says, and then when you get guys like this, he is typically usually a sellout for Esau. Achieving an American dream requires capital. And to grow capital, you need capital. It's a basic tenet of our economy. But for generations of black Americans, equitable access to the banking system is a promise that has never been fulfilled. Why? because the scripture says, he shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. It says, but for generations of the black Americans, equitable access to the banking systems is a promise that has never been fulfilled. From Jim Crow laws to the New Deal, Black Americans have faced systemic financial discrimination and exclusion, casting a long shadow of economic disparity that continues today. You see, this is the curse. This is a listen, man. We live in a world where money is everything, man. Money is like the lifeblood of the world, man. Right? If you ain't got enough of it, you're gonna die out here. If you got too much of it out here, you're gonna die out here. You know what I'm saying? Because too much of anything is not good for you either. Just like too little of anything is not good for you. But anyway, it says the racial gap in wealth is stark. The average white family in the U.S. has a net worth of $171,000, almost 10 times more than an average black family. According to the Brookings Institute, African Americans are more likely to live in poor neighborhoods with underperforming schools, poor infrastructure, limited access to quality health care, something the juice has brought to the forefront once again, right? Because this is all by design, all right? Communities are in disparity by design. Underperforming schools by design. Because when you go to wealthier neighborhoods, it's not just the small hats, because they're just one tribe of Esau. But Esau, in general, is way more prominent and successful in this world in economics when it comes to all aspects of economics than the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American. Okay? And that's by design. Chiefly by the law statutes that Yahweh Bashim Shai set up for, especially in the curses and in the blessings. Okay? But you don't never see the small hats in this predicament. A lot of times they're not even added within the statistics because they use a blatant cover, which is white families, right? So it says African Americans are more likely to live in poor neighborhoods. That's by design. With underperforming schools by design. Poor infrastructure by design, because we didn't set up these communities. And communities we did set up, they were destroyed. Why? Because the Lord said that this is not our rest. Micah 2:10. Malachi, what's that? Malachi 2:10? Micah 2:10. Arise and depart, for this is not your rest, for this polluted, and will destroy you even with a sword of destruction. Right. So here it is. Whenever you try to put your footprint in this, especially banking, which is extremely hard for so-called Negroes and Latinos and Native Americans to get into. Why? Because the small hats have an overwhelmingly tight grip on that. Here it is. This is from theweek.com, and this is from August 5th, 2021. And it says, how American small hats lost by winning. It says the president of Harvard is a small hat. So were two of his last four predecessors. The Secretary of the Treasury and the former chairwoman of the Federal Reserve is a small hat. So were her two confirmed predecessors in the former position of two predecessors in the latter. Since Ruth Ginsburg's death, there have been only two small hats on the Supreme Court. But that loss is particularly compensated by Merrick Garland's position as Attorney General, a consolation prize for his block nomination to the Supreme Court. The position of the small hats at the top of major civic institutions is both a success story and a somewhat touchy subject. Because whenever you mention anything about these people, the first thing you get is your anti-small hat, right? So that automatically mutes anything that you have to say. When you speak up against these people or you speak something concerning these people, all they got to do is run to that and then they'll just block you out. But this is all by design too. The position of the small hats at the top of major civic institutions is both a success story and somewhat of a touchy subject. Out of all disproportions to numbers, Under 2% of the U.S. population is a small population. Small hat occupies some of the most influential positions in American life. As a small but hugely influential group defined by a combination of religious, ethnic, and cultural characteristics, American small hats can be seen as successors to the WASP, which is white Anglo-Saxon Protestants of the 20th century. You see? The upward mobility of the descendants of most Ashkenazi immigrants in the late 19th century came at a cost, though. Small hats moved smoothly into positions open to Slovakia. What is going on? It says meritocratic competition. I don't know what this word is, so let's look it up. Never heard this word before. Come on, man. Okay. So meritocratic is relating to a characteristic of society in which power is held by people selected according to merit. And a lot of times their merit is just given to them by nepotism. But see, they like to claim that them making money and being successful, that's just a part of their culture. But you destroyed our culture. You destroyed our culture when you put us in hardcore bondage in this country. Kept us oppressed and in captivity in this country through your different legislations, bills, laws, okay, all that shit. And that's not happening to these small hats. Nobody's oppressing them. Just like Helen Mirren said, nobody's oppressing them. She told them to go home. And then what happened to her career? She was old. And they end up destroying her, man. All because she said the right thing. Anyway, it says, small hats moved smoothly into position, open to meritocratic competition, but gradually lost the virtue of vitality that fueled their success. Despite their decline in social invisibility, WASP won by losing. As institutions included Harvard and Federal Reserve and the judiciary achieved ever greater influence over American life. American small hats lost by winning, taking over the reins of the power, but giving up their distinctive identity. Despite their tiny population before the mid-19th century, small hats are woven into American mythology. Pilgrim and Puritans were inspired by the epic of the biblical Hebrews. During the War of Independence, ministers compared the 13 states to the tribes of Israel. Just as the chosen people required a new covenant in order to become a unified nation, Americans needed a new constitution. And the list goes on and on and on. Okay? But again, this shows you that our people are the Israelites. We gotta be. This is Psalms chapter 83, verse 1, because we're talking about how a lot of this stuff that's happened to us is our enemies conspire to do these things to us. The reason why you're in abject poverty, which it goes by the curses too. So really, Yahweh Shem Shai put the spirit on these devils to do what was listed in them curses, man. Okay? And over time and dispensation, it happened to us, man. And we grew up in that. So it says, Psalms 83 and 1, keep not thy silence, O power, O Most High. Hold not thy peace and be not still, O Most High. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, right? Because a nation is not just a nation by name. It's things that bring a nation that creates a nation. Your culture, your history, your identity, the things you do, how you deal with one another, the gods you serve. All of that plays a big part. And these nations, these heathens, these tabernacles of our enemies, they contrive together to break all that up for us. So the reason why we don't have financial footing in this world, or economic footing strong and valuable economic footing in this world. One, it goes back to the curses that was levied upon us for our iniquities and our transgressions. But two, it was enacted by our oppressors. Okay? All right? This is not by mistake. Okay? They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, you see, the so-called white man, and the Ishmaelites, the so-called Arabs, of Moab, the so-called Chinese, and the Hagareans, Gabal and Ammon, this Ammon being the so-called Japanese, Amalek, the small hats, the Philistines, the Hamites, with the inhabitants of Tyre. All right, so here it is. This is a list of our enemies that they come together and they make sure, with Esau at the top and Amalek being the top tribe of Edom, they come together and they contrive ways to keep us down, man. You know, to keep us destroyed. And they know that these curses are real. This is the reason why everything that you do in this society is counterproductive to Yahweh Shem Shai. Everything. Everything. They'll push an agenda on you, a weirdo agenda on you, but they won't push the truth on you. And when you pick up the truth and start taking it to yourself, then you get attacked. While we was all asleep in darkness and living a life of wickedness and evil, okay, while we were given into pleasures of this world, nobody had a problem with it. Everybody was cool. They had a problem because they were scared that eventually one of our people will rise up and change the minds. But they was cool with that. Nobody had a problem with that. There was no vocab Malone during the Black Power movement. There was no vocab Malone during the Brown Power movement, the Latin movement. There was no vocab Malone during the Native Power movements of America in the 70s. Where was he at? It was all good. Nobody was saying, oh, you're not black and proud. Everybody, they loved that. Oh, be black and proud. But be black and proud in the ghetto. Right? And while you're doing that, we're going to disarm you. We're going to confuse you. We're going to kill. We're going to set up these false leaders. We're going to tear down we're going to take out the real ones. You know, nobody had a problem with that. Because that was part of their plan. Always keep them in oppression. Keep them, hey, what was the scripture at? Oh, let me get that real quick. Was it Jeremiah 30 and 16? Oh, no, Jeremiah 50 and 33. Jeremiah 50 and 33. It says, thus said the Lord, the children of Israel and the children of Judah, this is both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. You see? So these nations, they kept us captive, but how did they do it? Well, the curses that was levied upon us, they helped exploit that even more. Okay? They kept division amongst us. All right? And they said, let's cut them off from being a nation. So they wouldn't have to deal with us. So one of the biggest things in this world, like I think it was Meyer Amschel Bauer, one of his sons said, give me control of the money and I care not who makes the laws. Because they can lock you out. If you, just like what's coming up, the MOCB, that's all about finance. And if you don't got it, guess what? You're going to be blocked out of the system. We already blocked out by many ways. But now they're going to put that device in you and you're really going to be blocked out if you don't want it. But even if you take it, you're still going to be blocked out. You're not going to maximize. You're not going to get the chip and get maximized in this society. There's no place in the New World Order for us. There's no place in Esau's system for us. All right? They want us completely gone. They want us excommunicated off the planet, man. If they could do that, they would, man. But because they can't do that, what they do is they use economics, which is one of the curses that are befalling us, to destroy us, which is something that these small hats are not suffering from. They're not suffering from abject poverty. They're not suffering from lack of banking institutions, lack of access to these banking institutions. They're lending to people. They're not they're not being linked to. And when I say them, I'm really speaking about the super elite, those ones that run the banking industries. Those are all small hats, man. Okay, so I'm not gonna hold this up. I ain't want this to be that long. I hope that it stays up, and I hope that it was edifying. But this is proof that Deuteronomy 40, Deuteronomy 28 doesn't fit these people, but they do fit up. And so with that, I'm saying shalom on to the next.